Just a very warm welcome from the Institute for Creative Conversations, based here in Johannesburg, just outside of Johannesburg, South Africa. So warm welcome to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Vicky, I'm sure it's morning where you are. And a very warm welcome to our mentor, colleague and friend, Trevor Hudson, who's also the co-founder of the Institute for Creative Conversation. I have a few questions to get us started, and then you're welcome to, if you have questions for Trevor or any wonderings for Trevor, you're welcome to place them in the chat box, and we will get to them as we engage in conversation. So when I was Googling to see how many books Trevor has now released, it's quite hard to find an exact number, Trev. But I discovered on a list on the Goodreads website of 48 books with 2,509 ratings. And these include some of the collaborations that you've done, reprints, Afrikaans translations, and even in Spanish. Did you know that?
I need to find the royalties for the book that got out in Spain.
There's two of them. Your pauses for Lent and your pauses for Advent are in Spanish.
Okay. Lovely.
But congratulations also on the publication of your most recent book, Discovering God's Will for Your Life, A User's Guide to Discernment. What number is this, Trev?
You know, I must go have a look at that list on Goodreads. I never knew I'd written so many books. I think that I've done 23 definite different books, and I think they've gone out in different translations, and maybe some of the collaborations with other articles and other books, maybe they've also included those. But I think as far as I know, I've done 23 separate books.
And this is number 23.
It is, yeah.
So I'm just wondering, perhaps as we start, Trevor, what do you hope your readers will discover in this new book?
Thanks, Nikki, and maybe this is also just a moment just to say thank you to you for initiating this, and a big thank you to everyone who has joined. It's hugely encouraging, and I say thank you. Yeah, Nikki, if you could come back to the question for this with this book, and then I'll kick off from there.
Sure. Just wondering what you hope your readers will discover in this new book for themselves.
Yeah. You know, it's really come out of my own struggle, and I guess, you know, ever from the very beginnings of my own kind of journey with God, I've always wondered, God, how are you calling me? How do you want me to live my life? So the whole area of kind of God's will for our lives has always been on my radar screen. And over the years as a pastor, I've come to realize that it's also really on other people's radar screen as well. You know, that often people wondering how God may be calling them or what God wants for their life. So my hope, to answer that very specifically, Nikki, the hope is that somehow in the book, there will be just some lamplights for people in terms of, you know, if just some lamplights in terms of engaging a daily journey of discerning how God may be calling them to live. I think so often I tend to, and I think people also tend to do this, that sometimes we kind of look for God's will in the big things of life, you know, the big decisions, and then we want to know what God wants. But I think I've come to really, really believe that that there's a sense in which every day God is leading, calling, inviting us into a way in which God wants us to live in our situation. So I'm also wanting to take the focus off kind of, you know, all the big decisions and getting those right into much more a kind of organic, everyday, you know, the shepherd who goes ahead of us, calls us by name, and we follow. And that is like a daily, everyday occurrence. And I'm hoping that the book, on the one hand, will communicate that vision to the reader, that readers will really have a sense that they are called by name. And then my other hope is that here are some lamplights to just maybe how do we go about discerning how God is calling us by name today.
Thank you. So kind of a sense of some lamplights. And I find myself wondering, as you write your books, as you wrote this particular book, what are some of the lamplights that you discovered for yourself in the process of writing this book?
The book itself, yeah. Nikki, I find writing, I think it's one of the reasons I do write. I found writing very helpful in terms of distilling my own, you know, what have I come to really, what have I come to know in terms of this whole area? And then, you know, I think finding words to put that on paper. So there's a sense, the lamplight is, I'm discovering what I maybe haven't put into words, I intuitively feel and know from my own experience, and then writing it kind of just makes it puts out there what is going on inside of me. And so in many ways it's discovering myself, what I really do, what I feel very deeply about when it comes to that. And that was the lamplight in many ways. Another lamplight would be, I've learned about this from so many other people, and you know, who've been my own mentors and teachers and companions along the way. And it was really helpful for me to integrate different voices that have been in my own history, just different voices, people who've just been so helpful, and then kind of integrating their different voices, maybe with my own voice, and just discovering how, you know, the lamplight of discovering how I can weave together maybe different voices into maybe into some kind of integrated whole around the subject. Yeah.
So as you say that, I'm reminded of what you often say to us in conversations and in training, that we have experiences with different people or different experiences,
Right.
but it's only when we take the time to actually reflect on them,
Right.
that we really start to embody them or to experience
Right.
them in a different way. And so
Right.
what I think I'm hearing is a similar process for you, bringing
Yeah.
together, reflecting on those other significant voices.
Very, very much so. And writing just has a way of, I think it just has a way of putting out there what's in here, and being able to see it. Yeah.
And so what is it like for you to know that the majority of what you write is almost from a personal experience, personal perspective? What is it like for you to know that there are so many people that get to read that? What is essentially something personal?
Sure. I think I have a really multi-layered response to that. I feel, someone says if someone's at a book signing says, kind of rather apologetically, thank you for taking up your, for letting me take up your time to, and for me, I just love signing books. It's like a privilege. It's like this person has actually picked up the book and wants to read it, and it's an incredible gift to me that they would like to read it. So I think a sense of privilege, of gratitude, of I think also there's, going into a public space is also a bit nerve-wracking at times. And I always, there's all, and there are folk who do appreciate one's writing. And along the way, there are people also who, for various reasons, really battle with what one has written. And I think just to learn how to let people have their own view about the book, and even if that view is very critical and quite antagonistic, but to let that be as well, without kind of defensiveness or I offer it with I hope the very best intentions of, I hope it's helpful, but I'm also aware that there will be folk who will not find it helpful. And so it's a bit of a mixture of gratitude, a sense of privilege. And I think I do I'm being quite influenced by Henry Nouwen, and Henry Nouwen once said that when we write, we need to trust that what is most personal, most probably will connect with other people and will be helpful to others. And so I sometimes want to almost trust that conviction which he passes on in his own book, that if I can get to what is most personal in my own pilgrimage, other people's lives are very different, etc., but somehow that there will be a kind of connection at a very deep level with other people at what is most personal. And that if I find something helpful, maybe, and I can offer it, there is a chance that someone may take it on board in their life in a different way, but also find it helpful as well.
Thank you. I just want to change track a little and reflect on your very first book, Signposts to Spirituality, which was published, I think it was in 1995. And my curiosity is what led you to writing that very first book?
Sure, two things. The one was that I was teaching a course at Kempton Park. And while I was teaching that course, I did on one page, just on one page A4 paper, I did a manifesto for a Christian spirituality today, and I made 10 points in 10 sentences, and I wasn't doing that in order to publish. I was simply doing that for myself. These were 10 critical ingredients for a kind of spirituality today. And I handed it out to those folk who were on the course. There were about 20 folk, and I called it kind of a manifesto for Christian spirituality today in South Africa. So that I did that around about I think I must have done that in about 1989, 1990. So I had that A4 piece of paper. And then in the early 90s, I was speaking at the Baptist conference, and their guest speaker was an overseas author, Gordon MacDonald. And so we were speaking together, and after the conference, he came up to me. I didn't know him, I'd never met him before. And he said, "Trevor, if you write, I will find you a publisher." And you know, that was quite something. He didn't know that I had, and so I went back to that manifesto and I fleshed that out, and that manifesto became the 10 chapters of the first book. And Gordon, you know, found a publisher for me, which was great. So in fact, the book was published overseas before it was published here in this country. It was published in the States and in the UK. And then a local publisher saw that, and they asked whether they could publish it in South Africa. That was, and so that's how it kind of came to birth.
Sure. So that was the first one.
So that was the first.
That was the first one. and what keeps inspiring you to write? That was sort of late 80s that the ideas started forming.
Sure.
What keeps inspiring you to write?
You know, I think it's a sense of call. It's a sense of vocation. Just before she died, my mom showed me a letter that I had written to her. So I was writing letters to my parents. So I wrote a letter because I moved away from home almost, you know, quite soon after leaving school. And I wrote to my mom, and she showed me that I had forgotten about it. And she showed me the letter just before she died. And in that letter, I say, "Mom, I hope one day I can write a book." So I think as a 18, 19, 20-year-old, there was something in me that, and so I'm going the long way around, but I think I'm making that what keeps me writing is I believe it's one dimension of my own personal calling, that it's a way that I can, it's a way I can serve God. It's a way I can serve others. And so I see it as ministry. I see it as calling. And I just enjoy it. I enjoy writing. You know, I feel that when I'm writing, I am being faithful to how I've been put together. Yeah.
And so I wonder what your mom would say about you continuing to write, not just one book.
I wonder. I often think about that. You know, my mom and dad were not kind of consciously Christian, and but I always, you know, it's also when I preach, I always have my mom and dad in my mind. You know, will they understand this? Would they have understood this? Would this have meant anything to them? So I'm always writing for them. So whether they have access to my books where they are alive right now, I don't know. And maybe I hope one day we can reflect together. Yeah.
Sure. I think one of the questions that a lot of people have spoken to me about being curious about in your writing is what is it you do to create time to write?
I get
in your
to
busy
the
life.
I get to the diary first, and so right at the beginning of every year, I will, before anything else comes in, I will put into the diary my time to write. When I was working, as it were, as a pastor, I was not allowed to write during work time because it was another income earning. I earned some royalties, so I in fact wrote until about 5 or 6 years ago. I wrote every Monday of my life, so that was my day off, and sometimes I would feel guilty about that because it was like, you know, supposedly, you know, one needs a Sabbath, one needs to rest. But writing never tired me. It never, and I remember when I was going through one of my moments of thinking, you know, I don't keep the Sabbath because I write on my Sabbath. My Sabbath was a Monday. And it was a psychiatrist who helped me, Dr. Cliff Allwood, who said, you know, this just sounds so recreative in your life. You know, and Sabbath is about recreation. And so I think just that helped me a bit to keep going. So I would say since 94, I have written almost every Monday of my life. And now that I'm a little bit more in charge of my diary, I like to rule out as well a Tuesday. So I write every Monday and every Tuesday. And then there's a sense in which I'm also writing informally, if that makes sense, because every time I prepare a talk, while I'm not writing a book, I am preparing a talk, and in the end, everything that I've written in the book has been said many times before. You know, it's not new. There's nothing in a book that I've written that I've not said or interacted with or shared at a retreat. Or so there's an informal sense in which I'm writing all the time because I'm preparing all the time to offer things, so that when I come to maybe write about a subject that I have material that I can kind of rework, but in an intentional way. I write on a Monday and a Tuesday, almost every Monday, almost every Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll know not to make any contact with Trevor on a Monday or a Tuesday.
No.
Those are writing days.
Those are writing days, yeah.
And take us through what a day of writing looks like for you, Trevor. How do you go about structuring that time or preparing yourself to enter that time?
Yeah. Well, I'm always praying that my computer can work and that I will have access to the computer. Without spiritualizing things, I really always kind of invite God into the activity. I'm sure God's already in the activity, but that just helps me to be, I hope, a little bit more open-hearted to God. and then I write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And so I write painfully slowly. And if I can on a Monday get about, if I start writing at about 8 o'clock, 8:30, and say I'll finish off at about 4, 4:30, if I can get about 4 to 5 paragraphs a day, I'm really, really happy about that.
Sure.
And so writing's very, very slow for me. And I do a lot of rewriting as well. Yeah.
It sounds like that's part of what you were speaking about earlier, about the distilling. You know, that the
Sure,
rewording,
yes,
rewriting
yeah,
is
yes,
part of
yeah.
the distilling process.
Yeah. Sure.
Sure.
And I'm always looking for a word that can say it a little bit more simpler and a little bit more freshly. And if I can get those two things together, I'm always happy. If I can get something, you know, if I can be relatively simple without being simplistic. I think there are two kinds of simplicity. There's a simplicity before I think we've thought through things. And then I think there's a simplicity that comes on the other side of complexity. And I'm always wanting to try get to that other side. So it's kind of working through all the issues and then hoping to come to some kind of simplicity, and then hopefully to find, to be able to say it simply, and then also to maybe say it freshly. Just maybe it's, I guess, finding that word, or I think there are some words that get tired. They just get tired, and people also get tired when those words come up. So how do you clean up these words so that they have a sense of freshness about them? That's always, I'm always wondering about that. Yeah.
And so there's the hope to complete a couple of paragraphs, 4 or 5 paragraphs every time that you start writing. Yep. How does that start though? Where do the ideas start? Do they start with a thought written down, or how do you immerse yourself in the writing process?
Right. Yeah. I think first of all, I want to be right at the, right at the beginning to, and I use the very similar thing when I teach or preach. What is the one thing I want to get across in this book? Just the one thing. So I have a thread that I hope will run through every chapter of the book. It will be the thread. And I want to be clear about that. So I'm clear about the thread. And then I like to almost, if you can picture a necklace, you know, with maybe like little, I don't know what you would put them, but little round, what would you call them? But just
beads,
like beads, right. And maybe each chapter is a bead on the thread or on the string. And then, so that's what I've got a string, I've got a thread, I've got some of the beads, and sometimes the beads will change as the book evolves. And there comes for me a lovely moment when, and I don't know how to say this, but I'm writing, it's usually about the 4th or 5th chapter. And then there's a little bit of an energy in the book itself. So I'm also following the book, that as I'm being surprised a little bit, you know, by the way it's unfolding. I never expected it to go in this direction. So I have an element of surprise by what is emerging in the writing process. But I do start with that thread. I do start with the bead, but I'm never too sure what's going to happen. and that's something that is quite, I don't know what to put that down to. It's just, the book then just takes on a little bit of a life of its own, and I need to follow the book a bit. That is still unwritten, but it's been written, and it's unfolding. So it's been a little surprised by the books, the unfolding of the book itself. Yeah.
Okay. So it almost sounds like you go on a journey, you know the starting point, but you're not always sure where you're going to end up.
Yeah, sure, right. Oh, definitely.
Sure.
Yeah.
And tell me about, or are there ever any moments of writer's block? What does Trevor's relationship with writer's block look like? Is it ever there?
I don't think I've experienced writer's block as it's been kind of classically described. You know, that there comes a moment where the person sits down and cannot write. Have there been moments of struggle? Yes, definitely. There have been times of real struggle, and that's often in the rewriting process. But I haven't really hit a wall, as it were. So I can't say too much, you know, about that particular experience of hitting a wall. I do need to take a bit of a break sometimes, just in between a book. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just before we open it up to everybody who's with us who might have some questions as well, I'm just wondering what words of advice you would have for any aspiring writers in the circle with us this afternoon.
Well, this is really one beggar helping another beggar to find food. I really mean that. You know, I just think writing, I think it's a constantly, I find it a learning journey, and I feel I'm learning to write all the time. And the people who've taught me the most have been good editors, who I've written a book which hasn't been published yet, and I've just been so helped by the way the editors have worked with the book. And the way, so what would I say? I would say listen to editors because they really are helpful people. And I would, but more basically, I never forget, again, it's a memory that comes to mind. It was, I'd had that experience with Gordon MacDonald. He had said to me, Trevor, if you write, I'll find a publisher. He said that to me in 1993, early 1994, I think he said that 92. I'm not too sure of the exact dates, but just a few months afterwards, I was given a lift to Dallas, a friend, Dallas Willard, who's a mentor. And then he just said something to me. He said, all you got to do now, Trevor, is sit down and do it and put glue on your bum. And so, you know, it's like sitting down and doing it, because I meet so many people who would love to write, but who never sit down, carve out the time and do it. And I hope that doesn't sound simplistic or judgmental. It's not meant to be either. But I think, you know, if I have a sense that I want to write, I think it's to sit down and to write, not even so much to write to publish, but I'm going to write this, at least it's going to be helpful for me. And I've got a lot of stuff that I've written that I don't think will ever be published, that's been rejected again and again. But that's okay. It's been helpful for me. So I've got loads of unpublished material. And now, yeah, so I would just say write for oneself, write to clarify, and keep at it, 3-4 paragraphs a day. And, 2-3 years of writing, 2-3-4 paragraphs a day on 1 day a week adds up to a book. So it's, I just would encourage people. And I think the long journey, I think the other thing is, and I'm talking far too much here, is trusting one's own voice. Just trusting that I can offer something distinctively, that in my own voice, that even if I stand on the shoulders of many other people and weave together their ideas in new combinations. And often I think the act of creativity is that. It's taking different ideas from different sources and weaving them together in a combination that they've never been in before. And that's the act of creativity. So I think there are two acts of creativity. I think there's one that's really, it's like, this has never been in the universe before, and I'm not that creative at all. But I think there is a creativity in bringing ideas and thoughts that other people have written and shared, and then and always what's the word, always acknowledging that. I think that's critical, but bringing them together in a way that they haven't been brought together before. That's a creative act as well. So I'm in that second one. I think there are some wonderful writers who are in that first one, but yeah.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. I'm just wondering if people who are with us, if you have a question for Trevor, if you would like to just ask it out, if you would like to type it in the chat. This one there. Anne-Marie, how do you let go of your book once it has gone to press and you can no longer change anything? And do you ever feel anxious? And how have the many years of writing, of the writing journey, impacted you or changed you?
No, I do feel anxious at times, and I think the anxiety, in every book I write, I know there are a few things that I've written that are not going to land well in certain hearts and minds. I always know that, and I'm anxious about that. I think there's a certain anxiety about that. I think I'm also learning a little bit about trust. That, and again, I'm sorry, he's just because he's been a mentor. Dallas would often say to me, Trevor, do your best, but don't really let go of the outcome. And I think letting go of outcomes has been helpful for me after doing my best. That I'm not in charge of outcomes. I don't know how this book's going to eventually land, that helps a little bit, that praying through my anxiety and then saying, okay, God, I'm going to trust you with this book now. And I offer it to you. I've done my best. How has writing changed me? I've become very careful with words. I think that I feel words for me are, you know, there's that passage in scripture which I've never heard a sermon on. I've never preached on because I'm too scared to preach on it. But there's that where Jesus says that we will be judged. And I want, Jesus is very loving, so it's a loving judgment. But that there's this, for every word that we have said, uttered. And there's something about words that I've become very, very, very careful with words, both in talking, both in writing. I think I speak a little bit less than I did because of that. How else has writing impacted me? I think also I think when I write, or when anyone writes and puts a book out there, there's a new relationship with the reader, and the reader now assumes you know something because you've written about it. And I think there's always been for me a challenge of keeping the relationship with the reader mutual, if that makes sense. That I might have written a book about discernment, but you, the reader, also have a history of discernment. And I don't think I've got it and you haven't got it. So I'm constantly also learning from readers, learning in terms of how they interact with what I've written. So there's a sense in which the life of the book, it kind of it continues in conversations, and I'm changed by those conversations. So, you know, that leads me to say, would I ever have rewritten a book differently that I wrote in 95? Not significantly, but there would be chapters that I may write a little bit differently because of the interaction with the reader that has changed me and helped me see something differently. And so I'm coming back to the thread that I wrote about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I'm now going to say it a little bit differently because of our interaction. So I have changed. I've changed. My understanding of the subject has changed or shifted a bit. How else have I changed? I think that's mainly that, what I've said, yeah.
Thanks, Trevor.
Any follow-up for you, Anne-Marie?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then from Audrey Marie, what do you enjoy reading?
I'm drawn to people who are reflecting on their lives now. I guess it's the age I'm at, and I enjoy reading particularly people who've given their lives to a journey of faith and who've sought to, in some way, be open to God throughout their life, and now are maybe reflecting on it. And and so I really enjoy reading a kind of biography, a kind of autobiography of a person's journey. That's what I enjoy reading. And then I really love when I discover someone who really touches me. And there haven't been many folk, but I then really like drilling down, as it were. So I read for depth more than breadth. I go down, as it were. So, for example, like Henry Nouwen's books touched me in the 80s. I've read everything that he has read. I've read everything that has been written about him by biographers. So I tend not to read too much for breadth. I do go for depth, with the hope that if I hit bottom, I will discover what the other people said as well. So that's how I read. So people say, "What are you reading?" And they're usually the same people. So, you know, I'm just rereading them and rereading them and rereading them all the time. Yeah.
Thanks for your question, Audrey Marie. You might have a question for Trevor.
I'm looking in the chat box for the next one to come up.
Maybe if I can just speak my thoughts. So they're more thoughts than anything else. I hear you have a lot of unpublished work, Trevor, and I'm just thinking of St. Ignatius and others who've made notes along the way, and eventually we get to read them in their own handwriting. And I love that. I've got a book that Beatrix Potter wrote. And there's something that really connects me to a person's handwriting.
Sure.
And I get connected to your books because I go to your signings and I have your own handwriting. So I wonder if there's ever a work that you'll publish that has your own handwriting. That
sure.
will, you know, kind of the musings or the ponderings of Trevor Hudson.
Yeah, I would love to do that one day, you know, and then maybe self-publish because no one else wanted to publish them, and share them out there. So, you know, yeah, I would like to one day, kind of, you know, just I would, and it's. I guess one doesn't want to, I don't want to be presumptuous in any way. But I do feel a sense of call to write. So I want to be faithful to that call. And if it does include putting into print some of the musings and the unpublished stuff, I may like to give it a bash. Yeah, but the problem is that no one can read my handwriting. I kind of write in tongues, so yeah, so I need to make it printable.
Thanks.
And then Heather asks if there's a way you would recommend we read your new book.
Thank you. A quick answer with one other person at least, because throughout the book there's a number of little exercises, and the exercises are there. They're really I think to read it in such a way that people can get in touch with their own experience and talk about it with one other person. And if the book can facilitate a conversation between two people, or maybe even a group, but let's say just two people, I would be I would be delighted, and I think that would be the best way to maybe to read it, to read it, to engage the exercises, and then just to talk a little bit about how we experience those exercises, because then people are the reader then is bringing their own experience, which I think is absolutely critical, and then bringing that into interaction with the book, with my experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Trevor. Anna asks if there are any other autobiographies you want to mention apart from Noan's.
I've just read, well, I've read it twice, by Parker Palmer. He's written, I don't know if it's going to be his last book, but I'm just trying to think of the title. It's about something about gravity and kind of, Audrey Marie would know the name of the book, and if she can put it into the chat, because she knows every book by Parker Palmer. But I've just read that. I read a Mystical Journey by William Johnson. He's a Jesuit, and he was reflecting on his life of living in the East throughout his career is the wrong word, in his vocation as a Jesuit. I read, yeah, I've got a whole lot of them, but let me not bore you with what I've read, but those are quite recent, and yeah, on the brink of everything. That's it, on the brink of everything. It's like when you're, my age, you're on the brink of everything. And it's a lovely book, and it's the kind of book, you sometimes read a book and you say, I wish I could have written that book, which always, my envies teach me so much, my jealousies. So when I read this book, I thought, Parker Palmer's done so well here. He's taken writings and he's woven them together in themes, and so that's what happens. I think I see something, I think, I wish I could have done that, but now I'm not Parker Palmer, I'm Trevor, so I need to see what it was that touched me there and now work with it myself. Yeah.
And then Maggie writes, this is not a question about writing, but about the topic of the new book. I've also read previous works by Trevor and appreciate his writing and speaking very much. Trevor, do you think God's will is always discernible? Because I sometimes feel like all the spiritual energy I have goes to an effort to discern, to connect the dots. And so often I feel like I've misread or misinterpreted.
Oh.
And wonder if maybe one should just live.
Thank you. I think that thank you so much, first of all, just for that question, because it's that kind of concern that generated the writing of the book. I think for many people, for myself included at times, the whole thing of discerning God's will becomes fraught with heaviness, with what happens if I get it wrong? That kind of God's will is in concrete. And if I get one step out, what's going to happen? And there's a very deliberate attempt throughout the book to reframe an understanding of God's will that is liberating, that there's a sense in which God's will unfolds in our life, and God's will includes my responsibility, my creativity, my desires, my deep longings. So I've really moved away from God's will as a blueprint to God's will as an unfolding journey that God and us create together, that that God's will is an act of co-creation. And I seek to do that. I'm using language now that is kind of I seek to do what I've said now in as simple a way as possible. And I just want to say thank you for that, raising that concern, because I think for many people, discernment becomes heavy and almost, it just becomes heavy. It becomes like a heavy task. It takes me out of the flow of life, because I'm having to work all this out, and I'm hoping, whether I've done it or not, I don't know, but I've really hoped to offer a much more dynamic, unfolding sense of living with God day by day by day by day by day, and seeking to respond to God in the immediate circumstance in which I find myself in the here and now. So if I have done that, I would have been faithful to the longing that brought the book into being.
Thanks for the question, Maggie. Les, do you know when it will be on Amazon? Sue, I don't know if you've already bought it on Amazon. No, not yet.
No, I was just trying it to see if it was there, and I can't find it at the moment.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would have been arriving tomorrow in true
yes, in
UK
true
Amazon
Sue
style, but not quite just yet. So perhaps we're a step ahead.
Okay. And Vicky, have you been able to obtain it in the States yet?
I haven't looked yet, but I can and see.
Okay. All right. So Les, perhaps you need to keep an eye out on Amazon for it, or otherwise get family in South Africa to send it to you. Any more questions or thoughts, or even words of thanks and gifts that you might like to give back to Trevor for all that his writing has meant to so many of us? Penny?
I would love to. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Penny.
It's been great to be here. So, Nikki, thank you so much for facilitating this. Thank you, Trevor. And it's just lovely to be part of community always. I so appreciate it. Nikki, when you mentioned Signpost to Spirituality, it was written in 95. And I just want to echo what Trevor said actually about just reading books together. Because in 95, Trevor, you will appreciate that Valmere Welsh at Rosebank Methodist constructed a workshop, which many of us attended. And then Andre Leroux and I constructed a retreat, and Nikki was part of that retreat. And subsequently, with all of your books, I have continued to lead Bible studies and share them, always in relationship with others. And so I just wanted to honor that call and your heart. And just because we're talking about discernment, you know, that is how your books have really touched not only me, but so many of the people I'm in relationship with, and that they have fed us deeply. And the word that came to mind as you were talking about simplicity was so often the books are just, they're profoundly simple, and they're simply profound. And they have been my companions in these last 26 years now. So I just wanted to, just honor the work and honor all that you have said today. And the last thought was just, as a psychologist, so many people talk about gaslighting, and that also goes to discernment. And you've used that wonderful phrase, you know, these will be the lamplights. And so in the midst of so much gaslighting, it is lovely to have your works, which are so often lamplights to us to keep us along the way. So thank you.
Thank you, Penny. And what is quite, and it's wonderful just to say this, but once Penny asked me to do a retreat and down in Goedgedacht, and the theme of the retreat we did was questions God asks us. And so I had to go find some questions, and I think I shared 4 or 5 questions. Then I thought, no, there are some more questions in the Bible. And I think about 2 years later, a book came out, but that's how it kind of all weaves together. And yeah, grateful.
Thanks, Penny. Any other gifts that you might like to offer back to Trevor?
Can I say?
Please, Edna.
Trevor, we hear you when you speak from your heart and when you write from your heart, and it is so lekker today to hear this in your own voice and with your own heart. And I just want you to know that it has been received, your message that you have spent your life on thus far to write in your books. It has been received, and it is a great blessing for myself, and I'm sure for all of us. So thank you for the Mondays and the Tuesdays that you've spent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We have a couple of minutes
Trevor,
left. Yeah, Vicky, go for
Trevor,
it.
I would
Vicky.
love, I want to say thank you so much for being disciplined. I'm sorry, I'm so emotional because at my Kleenex, your writings have touched me in such a deep way. And I know a few months ago when we were together via Zoom, you talked about what has been the arc for us, like Noah, God showed Noah how to build an ark, and that was a place where they could go. And your writings for me have been an ark. And I'm so grateful that people have said this, that you put the glue in the seat, like Dallas said, just glued yourself down, because it is a discipline. And not only has it benefited you, but it has benefited people around the world. And I am so grateful for that. And I want to say thank you. And today is our national holiday of Thanksgiving. And so how beautiful that I get to join all of you in this. And I'm very grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Vicky, for your words. They're a gift to me. Thank you.
And we're thankful that you were able to join us all the way from the States on Thanksgiving. Thanks, Vicky. Anybody else? Trevor, we also have Shivani joining us here. She's joining us from Kathmandu in Nepal. So we really do have a wonderful collection of community here this afternoon.
I'm blown away. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity, Nikki. I'm really grateful for the space. I'm learning a lot of new stuff. Honestly, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you. It's
Siobhan.
good to have you with us. Maggie, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Hi, I just wanted to say hi to all of you and thank Trevor very much for answering my question. I'm from Egypt, and I was surprised to know we're on the same time zone. And thank you for all you do. I'm sorry, my connection is very bad, but I'm really grateful. I just wanted to thank Trevor and thank all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for joining. Yeah.
Thank you.
And maybe just for me to share one of my favorite memories of meeting somebody on a retreat at St. Benedict's in Rosettenville. And I know Trevor's spent many retreat times there. And it was in the early 90s, mid 90s. And whilst we were there, a group of nuns were returning from North Africa, from doing mission work in North Africa. And they'd come to the convent for their annual break, I suppose. They were there to rest. And one of the ladies, one of the sisters, was about 85. And she was so excited when she heard that we were Methodists, because did we know Trevor Hudson? And was quite, yeah, she didn't have enough good things to say about you, Trevor.
Thank you.
She said, Trevor Hudson is the man most like Christ I have ever encountered in my 85 years on earth.
Shame.
And so, yeah, so we're really grateful that we get to have you as a mentor, a colleague, and a friend.
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, it's all deeply mutual, and I'm grateful for our bonds. Thank you, and thank you for this moment. It's a source of deep consolation, and I want to say thank you to each of you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Trevor. We stand on your shoulders. And so thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and wishing you a blessed Thanksgiving. And as we enter into this sacred time of the year, may it be Christ-filled in many ways. Look forward to connecting with everybody in the new year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor.